Welcome back to Great Animal Escapes. This installment focuses on aquadoggos. Seals and sea lions are both aquatic mammals and are also pinnipeds, which is Latin for thin-footed. In case you're wondering, sea lions are larger, louder, more social, and much better adapted to walking on land. They also have larger flippers that can rotate, allowing them to effectively walk, whereas seals have smaller, non-rotating flippers. Seals basically belly flop around on land. Seals are more hydrodynamic in water, though, and are generally better swimmers. Whereas sea lions tend to congregate in groups, seals tend to be solitary until mating season once per year. Like the penguins from the birds episode of this series, seals and sea lions often escape from captivity when zoos flood. Sometimes they wander around the park like the penguins do, but sometimes they get to go out on grand adventures. Sometimes they even escape and are never heard from or seen again. In late September of 2023, Sally the sea lion escaped from her enclosure at the Central Park Zoo in the Bronx during flooding caused by a storm. She basically just explored other parts of the zoo, then returned to her enclosure without incident. She never left the sight of zoo employees and just basically wandered back into her habitat after a brief time outside of it. She decided to return to her pool and the company of two other sea lions. The water then receded and the sea lions were once more contained in the habitat. Neither the zoo employees nor the animals were ever in any danger despite the flooding. A significantly more damaging flood struck in Duluth, Minnesota, USA, in June of 2012, leading to two seals and a polar bear escaping from their enclosures. The bear, named Berlin, was almost immediately tranquilized and returned to her enclosure. The two seals, a male named Feisty and a female named Vivian, had a bit more of an adventure, especially Feisty. The seals were described as having been washed away from their exhibit, and Feisty wound up on Grand Avenue in Duluth outside the park. He was photographed with an expression on his face that can best be described as, "I am stupefied as to what has just occurred." Motorists used their cars to block traffic while corralling him into a small puddle until police and firefighters arrived. The emergency personnel were able to return Feisty to the zoo without incident. Vivian was also returned without incident. Neither the seals nor the bear were harmed, but the flooding did claim the lives of 6 sheep and 4 goats at the park's petting zoo, as well as a raven, a vulture, a snowy owl, and a donkey. Damage to the park was extensive, but the protocols for containing the dangerous animals resulted in only Berlin getting loose, albeit behind the zoo's perimeter fence. In May of 1963, Jeff the sea lion escaped from Marine Wonderland in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. He was spotted at several different locations in and around the Great Lakes system over the next few days, moving away from the park. Jeff was found in Lake Ontario on May 27th and transported back to the park. Here's the problem for Jeff, though. There's a specific geographic feature between Marine Wonderland and Lake Ontario. That feature is Niagara Falls. When Jeff was recovered, which was from an area on the other side of the falls from where he escaped, he had sustained several injuries. He had injuries to one flipper and inflammation around an eye and his mouth. He could have sustained similar injuries without going over the falls, and the falls themselves could do far worse from an injury standpoint, but no other plausible path for Jeff to have taken was ever put forward. It was believed that the most likely way that Jeff could have gotten from the park to where he was captured is if he went over the falls. Now, there is some skepticism surrounding this claim, but seals' poor mobility on land and the only water route between the two locations containing the falls makes this somewhat of an Occam's razor kind of a situation. When a crew showed up to try to recapture the seal, Jeff struggled and, as you would expect from a wounded animal, bit one of the men trying to recover him on the right arm. He was hoisted up a 40-foot embankment using rope and then placed in a car. He was then returned to the park where he was placed back in his enclosure with his fellow seals. On June 17, 1958, a sea lion named Cyril escaped from Storybrooke Gardens Zoo in London, Ontario, Canada. He apparently made his way down the Great Lakes system all the way to Sandusky, Ohio, USA. For humans in a car, that's about a 230-mile or 370-kilometer trip. It's probably a much shorter distance if you go there via Lake Erie, which is what Cyril was assumed to have done. The thing is, the city of Sandusky sits on the shores of Lake Erie, but London, Ontario does not. I'm not sure how Cyril got to Lake Erie. There doesn't appear to be a direct water path, at least not based on the research that I did. I could be wrong about this, and any Canadian viewers can feel free to correct me on this in the comments if I missed a water route. The only path I could find on a map was somewhat circuitous. London, Ontario is near the Thames River, which I'm not sure if Canadians pronounce Thames like the British do or Thames like someone reading it phonetically would. I'm just going to call it Thames and let any Canadians call me out in the comments if I'm wrong on that as well. The Thames itself doesn't even flow directly into Lake Erie. It flows into Lake St. Charles near the US border near Detroit, Michigan. The Detroit River connects Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie. From there, Cyril would still have to cross from the northern shore of the lake, located south of Detroit, to the southern shore across the width of the entire lake to reach Sandusky. No matter how he got there, Cyril was captured in Sandusky and then transferred to the Toledo Zoo in Toledo, Ohio. Since the seal's origin was in Canada, the lead zookeeper in Toledo originally asked the zoo in Ontario to file for the seal's return with the US government. A decades-old US court ruling had set a precedent that escaped wildlife no longer belonged to their original owners. After a week of negotiation, though, Cyril was returned to Canada without any further incident, international or otherwise. And for our final story, hello again, Roger Williams Park Zoo in Providence, Rhode Island, USA. If you've watched previous installments of this series, you'll be familiar with this park. So far, over the course of a century, they've lost 2 blue-throated piping guans, 3 macaws, and the reigning king of grand adventures when escaping from the zoo, Jocko the monkey. All of those animals were recovered. In 1946, a sea lion named Rhonda joined the list of escapees from the zoo. She got out of her enclosure and made her way to some other lakes near the park. From there, she scooted across land and water to Pawtuxet Cove. The cove is about 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers from the zoo, and there are neighborhoods in between, so the sea lion possibly had to travel around houses to get there. Some people, presumably zoo personnel or local emergency responders, tried to capture her at the cove in front of a crowd of onlookers, but she managed to evade them. She then made her way down the Providence River and headed toward Narragansett Bay, never to be seen again. So while Jocko's adventure may have been grander than Rhonda's, Rhonda has the record for the longest time spent away from the zoo. And that record is basically forever, as the lifespan of a sea lion is 20 to 30 years, and she escaped in the 1940s. And that's all for this episode. As always, if you enjoyed the video, or happen to know where Rhonda spent her retirement years, or happen to have any corrections about facts about Canada that I got wrong, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment on, or share the video. And thanks for watching.